Today's podcast may not be suitable for children. Please be advised.
Oh, my sweet child, please believe me. I am the angel you must follow. May all your sins be gone from thy devils. Do not trust anyone but me. In today's podcast, we go deep, deep into the most dangerous cults in history. It's time to remove the filth. And once and for all, in this episode of The Filthy Truth Exposed, let's do it.
So what's up, Bilbo? How you doing?
I'm prepared to go deep into our topic today.
Good. This is going to be a good one, man. So I guess I'll start it off. What's that?
Yours.
Yes. I can't wait. So I want to ask you, I know you did a little research on this. What's the difference between a cult and religion? What do you use? I'll give you my take and then you can give me your take.
Oh, the difference between a cult and a religion, there is just the word cult and religion.
They're about the same.
That's the difference.
I kind of agree with you. Yeah.
I mean, probably the biggest difference would be like a cult they'll banish you and they separate you from your friends and family. A religion doesn't tend to separate you from your loved ones in the same way.
I think that's true. Yeah, I think you're right. There's some definite differences there. So I'm just read the quick definition, what it says. Okay, so religion is a set of beliefs, feelings, doctrine, and practices that defines the relations between human beings and sacred or divinity. A cult is a small religious group that is not part of a larger or more anticipated religion, which is believed to have socially deviant practices and beliefs. Now, when I read that, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I totally agree with that. I mean, some cults may not be that deviant, and some religions definitely are deviant. So, and then this one I definitely agree with, which is the main difference between a cult and religion is that a cult is smaller, less organized, and newer than a religion. I think that definition actually is probably the most accurate. Would you agree with that?
Sure, that's how we think of them. Yeah, cults tend to be, we think of them as smaller, less of a congregation than the religions have, thousands or millions of people. Whereas a cult maybe just has a few hundred or a couple thousand,
So before we get into this about the most dangerous cults, that are out there, these are ones that I found, but I'm sure there might be more dangerous ones that I found. So, but I want to just kind of read these two things that I saw that I thought was like, wow, this is really interesting. So a lot of times we think of, organized religion is sort of better in a sense than these cults. And when I talk about these cults, you're going to say, wow, they did some crazy stuff. But let's for a second just look at religion, and I'm going to go over just for now, I'll just go over two religions, Christianity and Islam. Okay, so in Christianity, of course, they had the Crusades, where thousands of people were killed, way more than any cult could ever commit. There was the Inquisition. There were killing of witches, it was just women who defied stupid laws, right? So this guy named Rudolph J. Rummel, he said that 14 million native North and South Americans were killed by Europeans, mostly by European Roman Catholicism. The massacre of indigenous people in America was also really huge. And this, I don't think, could be just blamed by religion, but it was partly fueled by religion and economics. So that's one thing. So if you look at the total damage just by Christianity alone, it outpaces any of the small, cults, no matter which one we cover, right? And then we get to Islam. It says, for the first century of its existence, Islam had a history for violence. The killing only slowed down as the Islamic Empire finally ran into boundaries in the 8th century. For many years now, Islam has been the most violent religion in the world. Around 60 million Christians were slaughtered during the jihadic conquest. Half of the Hindu civilization was annihilated and 80 million Hindus killed. Jihad destroyed all of Buddhism along the Silk Route. About 10 million Buddhists died. In Africa, over 120 million Christians and animists, that's people who believe in, animal worship, have died over the last 1,400 years of jihad. And approximately 270 million non-believers died over the last 1,400 years for the glory of political Islam. These are the crimes of jihad, which are not taught in school. So that's just two religions that I talked about that have a horrible past. That's not including any of the other religions. Now, believe me, I'm not trying to say, people in those religions are bad people or there's not good things in those religions, but just as purely historically, they don't have a very good record. I'm starting with that right off the bat, just to give some, I don't know what you call it, some historical perspective before we talk about these other crazy guys. You know what I mean?
That's a lot of destruction for sure. Yeah.
A lot of destruction. Now, I hope that's fairly, I read those things and I think those things are fairly accurate. Someone might say, oh, well, that's not totally, true or this and that, but I would say some of that has to be true, right? There's got to be, I would
some of it has
some of that has to be true. Yeah. And it's probably worse than what I'm saying, when you add up all the religions and what they've done, because we didn't even talk about Judaism. We didn't talk about those guys or any other groups. So I'm just saying it's pretty bad. So now, do you want me to start off with my first one that I picked, or do you want to do yours first?
Yeah, I do have a definition of cults.
Let's hear it.
Just some points. These are things that you can use to help you decide if you're in a cult or if you're thinking about a cult or if you want to define something as a cult. So they tend to have an unquestionable commitment to their leader.
Yeah.
They don't allow things like doubting the religion or the cult, the belief system. They don't approve of questioning if you ask questions, and also dissent from their beliefs is discouraged.
I agree with that
heavily. They tend to have mind-altering practices like speaking in tongues. Can you give us an example of speaking in tongues? Right, that's
something like that. Exactly, I'm not sure if that's
it. That's it.
I wasn't very convincing, but I think that's what
they tend to have an us versus them mentality. So they create a lot of division between the people in the cult and the people outside of the cult. Right. There's a lot of shame and guilt, and they tend to force people in their congregation to cut ties with non-believers. You've heard of suppressive. They call them suppressive people, like in the Scientology cult. People who aren't in Scientology, they call them suppressive people. They tend to be very preoccupied with bringing in new members. Like they're very focused on getting new people into the cult. And they live and socialize only with members. So they stay sort of with themselves and communicating less and less with people outside of the cult. Yeah. And they use fear to sort of control people. There's also submission, exclusivity, the persecution complex, control, isolation, love bombing, which is where they say things like they make you feel really, really good. They love bomb you. They make you feel really, really good.
Yeah.
They tend to say that they have some sort of special knowledge that they can impart upon you, a very special, unique knowledge. And sometimes it takes levels before you can attain that special knowledge.
Yeah.
They use indoctrination, things like salvation. If you follow us, if you do the things we say, then you can be saved.
Yeah.
There's a lot of groupthink and cognitive dissonance, which is where you hold two thoughts or more than two thoughts that conflict, and somehow you make it in your own mind. You're supposed to make those make sense, but they don't actually make sense. They conflict. That's cognitive dissonance. There's a lot of shunning. They mess around with gender roles, and they have certain appearance standards, like things you need to wear, or
Yeah.
like, you know, certain dresses, or covering your head, things like that. So if you see any of those things, you might be in a cult, or you might be dealing with somebody who's in a cult.
Yeah, that was good, man. A lot of stuff in there. I agree with all that. So that was really good. Let's see. I don't think I had anything to add, man. That was perfect. Should we start with the first dangerous call? And
yeah,
we'll tell
one
them
of the
about
most dangerous, I hope.
What's that?
One of the
let's
most
see.
dangerous.
On this one, I don't think it's the most dangerous, but definitely the most weird. I'm starting with the best one first, maybe. I'm not sure, but okay. So this one is called the Matamoros human sacrifice cult. So basically, I'll just read this to you. So it started in 1989. It was with 4 college students. They went to a party, partying up, and the party was about to end, so they decided to go to this border town in Matamoros, Mexico.
Spring break came with a tragedy 30 years ago that's still fresh on the minds of some in the valley. You may remember Mark Kilroy. He was a 21-year-old University of Texas Austin student. Kilroy was abducted and murdered by a satanic drug smuggling cult in Matamoros. Channel 5's Cecilia Gutierrez spoke to 2 people tied to that tragedy. They explain how the events played out and how they still have an impact on their lives, spring break, and the valley today.
There, the legal drinking age was 18. So anyway, so they went there, and one guy, for some reason, just kind of got lost, or he went somewhere he shouldn't have gone, and then everybody else came back. The name of this student, his name was Mark Kilroy. Anyways, so he never returned. So they contacted the U.S. consul in Matamoros. The police force, they went along, they searched along the Rio Grande to look for him. They offered a big reward. He was even on America's Most Wanted, so it was a pretty big deal. So basically they set up a roadblock because they were suspicious of activities going on down there. And this one dude, he refused to stop. He just kept going. So they went on this big chase. They were chasing after this guy, and they didn't even know it was related to this person he was just basically, he was kidnapped, or, he was missing, so anyways, so they went through this high-speed chase, and it went down to a ranch in Santa Elena, just south of Matamoros. And anyways, the guy got out of the car, and then they arrested him or whatever. And they were at this ranch. Okay. And so at this ranch, they found, 400 pounds of marijuana, which, hey, that's cool. No big deal there. No big, but they also noticed a small shed. Okay. We're getting to some horror movie stuff when I talk about this. And there was this foul, nasty stench, it was coming out of the shed. All right. And then they found these candles and altars that were in the same area. So later the police discovered that Kilroy, the name of the guy was missing, was kidnapped for purposes of human sacrifice. Okay. The details were quite gruesome. Kilroy's skull had been cut open and his brain removed. His legs had been chopped off below his knees, and his spine had been cut open and threaded with a wire. Okay. So the man behind this cult, his name was Endafio de Jesus Constanzo. He was the mastermind behind it all. He was raised with this Afro-Caribbean religion called Santeria, but his form of it was more deadlier. He performed various rituals, including cleansing, fortune telling, the typical shit, right? Healing for pay. Some of his clients were extremely wealthy and powerful, including law enforcement officials and drug dealers. He convinced several high-level drug pins that he could cast spells to make them invisible to law enforcement. So, pretty bizarre. Okay. And his clairvoyance could tell them which days, to move products safely. In return, the drug dealers paid Costanzo, a lot of money for these services. What do you think of this cult so far?
It sounds scary and gruesome.
Yeah, okay. So so eventually they once they got on the ranch, they exhumed the remains of 14 more people. All of them had evidence of torture, decapitation, burning, castration, and at least one victim removal of his heart. When police searched the shack, they found evidence of human sacrifice and mutilation that occurred there. Bottles and jars filled with putrid mix of blood, hair, and other tissues. A 55-gallon drum apparently used to boil victims' flesh off their bones. And of course, there's this thing called Naganaga. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. It's Nganga. It's basically a big container. Is a stew of rotting flesh, both human and animal. And this, of course, included Kilroy's brain. Costanzo had an accomplice, someone to help him in America. And this lady her name was Sarah Aldretti. She was an honor student at Texas Southmost College. She majored in physical education. She was known by other students as friendly and outgoing. But this tall Mexican woman had been working with Costanzo for years, recruiting and bringing people across the border, kidnapping people across the border from the United States into Mexico. By the end of the investigation, they would discover more bodies suspected of being killed by Costanzo, bringing the total number of known victims to 23. So, with all that, we have a rating system, people. Here's how we rate this cult. We have 3 factors. Weirdness factor, how weird are they? The power of influence, how many people have been involved in that cult? And the danger level. For this one, weirdness factor, 5. 5 out of 5, baby.
Yeah.
Super fucking weird, right?
Definitely.
Power of influence, only a 3. They weren't a gigantic cult. They were pretty small. But the danger level, if you were in there, you were pretty much toast.
Yeah.
5 out of 5, baby. Danger, 5 out of 5. Bam. I'm done with the Matamoros. Now it's time to hear your cult.
Well, we're going to talk about Heaven's Gate.
Bring it, brother. Bring it.
Yeah, this is the cult that became famous in 97 when it was on the news that 39 members had committed suicide. They drank a concoction of applesauce and phenobarbital successively over a period of a few days. They had some of the members killed themselves later so they could cover the ones that died as they died with, they put a purple cloth over their face. And I think they had like they all had Nike tennis shoes or something like that. That was kind of the joke. But it's interesting that they ate applesauce and phenobarbital because the leader was Marshall Applewhite, which I just thought that was interesting. It's Applewhite, and they use applesauce to kill themselves. But the reason they took the applesauce and phenobarbital mix was because they believed they're part of this religion was known as ufology, which is a UFO religion. It's based on
totally true, by the way. Totally true, everyone.
And you should definitely visit their website because the website still exists. And it's probably, if we had a rating system for the websites, it's one of the best cult websites that I've seen. But they believed they followed the Hale-Bopp comet.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
They believed when it came by, the closest approach of the comet to Earth was when they should commit suicide, and then they could board a spacecraft they called it the next level. So they could board the spacecraft after they committed suicide. It would take them to the Hale-Bopp comet. Anyways, it was started by Bonnie Nettles, who was in a relationship with Marshall Applewhite. They were known as T and Doe. So TI and DO, where that's what they were known as the leaders.
Yeah.
At the peak, they had over 200 members, and 39 of them died. A few of them died after that as well, after that main suicide in 97. That's basically it. That's Heaven's Gate.
Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us. Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us. Now,
Darwin's theory at work. That's all I got to say right there. You know what I mean?
So the weirdness,
The stupidest people get killed off. You know what I mean? I think with all these cults, that's some of it with those guys, they was in see, I like that. Actually, to me, I don't mind that one because, you know, they're just doing what they think is right. You know, they're not hurting anybody in a sense. They're hurting themselves, which I'm a little bit more for. At least that they're not going out and like in this other one, it was like they were kidnapping people and, you know, and doing some crazy stuff. So how do you rate this one?
It was based on science too, in a sense, right?
That's great, man. How do you rate these guys?
Well, we got the weirdness factor for this one. It's pretty weird, I think, because it's based on UFOs and the Hale-Bopp comet.
Yeah, I agree.
It kind of makes some sense because the comet comes close, and so that's when they kill themselves, and then they'll be transported to that comet. So the weirdness factor, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, okay. I'll buy that.
If you watch any of the Marshall Applewhite
I agree with you, man.
It's pretty weird.
How about the power of influence?
The power of influence is pretty low on this one because they only had about 200 members, and of course, over 40 of them died. So they didn't influence too many people. So it's a pretty low power of influence. But the fact that they got people to commit suicide, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 on the power of influence scale.
I agree.
Now we're talking about the most dangerous cults here. This one, I don't consider that dangerous because I think there are a few members still, but, and 40 of them did die. So that is pretty dangerous.
Let's take a look at this though. Okay. So the ones that didn't off themselves, those were the unsuccessful ones. Okay. The ones that decided that they chickened out, they're not true believers as far as I'm concerned. All right. So, all right, man. Sounds good.
I'm going to give it a 2. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 on the danger level.
Yeah. I kind of think it's a little higher than that because, well, I guess how many people out of the total died?
Well, they only had about 200 members and 39 died on those few days in 1997, in March of 97.
Yeah. Boy, not much of a turnout on that one. It seems like you'd think a higher number would have killed themselves. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think you said 2 on the danger
2
level?
out of 5. Yeah.
I think you're right. All right, let's do the next one. This one is called the Nuwaubian movement. Okay, and I think it went by a bunch of different names, but that's the name I'm going to use for it for now. It's a new religious movement. It was founded by a guy named Dwight York. He also goes by Melancholy York. The Nuwaubians, you know, those are people that follow the Nuwaubian movement. They considered him the master teacher. He started off as a black Muslim group in New York in 1967. He changed his teachings and the name of his group many times. He incorporated ideas from Judaism, Christianity, and UFO religions. His followers built an ancient Egypt-themed compound called Tamaray. Okay, here's the core beliefs of this group. He believed that white Americans are soulless and are the devils. Afterbirth must be buried to keep Satan from cloning your kids. White Americans were created as a race of killers and are supposed to be slaves to African Americans. York is a self-professed extraterrestrial called Rizaquin. He brought a language from space called Nuwaubic. He gave them a new Bible called the Holy Tablets. So, anyways, pretty wacky stuff. Let's see. I think I'm going to skip this part. I could have go on to some of his stuff that he said, but we know already from the stuff he believes in, we know the dude's wacky, right? So, but here's the thing, right? Many of his followers were given quotas to make money for his group. They had to either beg for money or sell literature. Those who do not met the quotas were beaten or otherwise disciplined by York's thugs. York controlled his followers' lives almost completely. He chose the spouses and mating them according to his whim. Men and women lived in separate buildings. When they wanted to have sex, they were forced to ask permission to use a designated room. Sex of one's spouse was a privilege granted when one's duties had been performed satisfactorily. Okay, interesting. You got anything to say about that? Nope. Okay. York used the group, boy, this is going to surprise you, as his personal harem. Okay. He was effectively able to have sex with any woman in the cult. He allegedly impregnated many of these women, and it wasn't long before he started to pursue underage girls. York purchased an 80-acre property in the Catskill Mountains in New York in 1983. He used it as a retreat, okay, and he spent $5 million to build a mansion on the land. Girls and women were brought to camp. They had like a little trailer there, where they could live. One woman who grew up in the cult recalls being sent as a 6-year-old to Camp Jazir, where York molested her. Another woman recounts being manipulated into having sex with York when she was 12 years old. Some of the cult's older women were reportedly helped to manipulate the children, showing them pornography and sometimes participating in the molestation. By 2000, the Nuwaubian movement had 500 members. Followers had declined steeply after York was convicted of numerous counts of child molestation and financial violations. He was sentenced to 135 years in federal prison. Something interesting about this group that I find kind of fascinating is that they didn't start off as wacky as I read. When they first start, they had this church and they were doing, things to help the poor and so this would be kind of the kind of thing where, you could easily had met someone that was very charismatic and you'd say, oh, you want to come to church with me, and then you'd be like, yeah, sure, and the next thing you know, I mean, you get in there and one of the things too is he did these things kind of slowly used control. Like for instance, with holidays, he had it so you were only supposed to spend holidays with your Nuwaubian, with your own group and not with your actual families. So there's that isolation.
Yeah.
And then slowly, you contributed stuff and he started taking over different people's lives. And before you know it, man, it was total chaos. So that's pretty much it, man. Guys are wacky as shit. So for the Nuwaubians, weirdness factor, bam, 5 all day. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Power of influence, definitely a 5. I mean, this,
Wow.
I think he influenced quite a few people. I don't remember how many it was, but 500 members I consider a lot. So I would give them pretty high on that number. In danger, maybe like a 4 or 3. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously some people didn't get, but it was definitely bad. I don't know how you rank that one. Is it? So what do you think?
4 out of 5 for the danger.
Yeah, maybe 4 out of 5. Definitely not as crazy as the other one, the Matamoros, but definitely pretty bad though. And all those things that you mentioned in the beginning about the different ways that you manipulate someone into a cult, this guy did it. I mean, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
So
The charismatic leader slowly convinces you and manipulates you. Yeah.
yeah,
And then isolates you.
definitely. And I think anybody can be led down the wrong path. Even if it's not religion, it could be different ideas. when you start following certain people and you don't think about what you're thinking about, what the person is giving you, you never know what what path you're going to end up on. You know what I mean? So I can't wait to hear the next one you want to cover. Let's do one more and then we'll see on our time here.
Next is NXIVM.
Yeah.
You spell it NXIVM. The main leader was Keith Rainier, and he eventually Allison Mack, she was an actress in some TV show.
Okay.
She was also known as one of the leaders. The weird thing about this cult, it was basically a sexual slavery, sex trafficking cult, as so many of them are.
Yeah.
But the weird thing about this one is the women, it was a lot of women, mostly women, they were literally branded with, they would take a hot poker and they would have a branding session. And it was super painful. And we'll show a picture of the brand. And if you look closely at the brand,
yeah,
nobody really knew this at the time, but it's actually Keith Rainier's initials, KR, that make up the brand. And if you look even closer, you'll see Allison Mack's initials, A and M, in the brand as well.
Oh, wow.
And this was the brand that branded the women as part of a secret society called DOS, spelled DOS. I don't know what that means, but that was their secret society. So supposedly there's still about 50 members that exist in this cult. And I think
can I cut you off for 1 second? Sorry to interrupt you, but this group is very discriminatory. Only the women got the branding. Okay. I don't think that's right. I think it should have been equal opportunity. Men should have gotten the branding as well. Don't you think it's a little unfair?
Well, I think there weren't any men in it. There might have been some men. I'm not positive, but this is the Filthy Truth Exposed. I think it was mostly women.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That's how they tried to recruit people too, is by using, their sex trafficking, and that's how they made money for the cult too. The weirdest factor though, it's just another sex cult basically. Yeah. But the branding thing, I thought it's pretty extreme and it's pretty creepy. But also really,
did they do any damages, any kidnapping or any like did they pay their taxes? Did they, is there anything that's nefarious going on with these guys?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Well, how would you rate them?
Well, the weirdness factor, I'm going to go pretty high on this just based on the branding.
Yeah.
Because it seems kind of unique. So I'm going to give them a 3 out of 5 for the weirdness factor.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you look at the brand, it's just really interesting to see those initials in there.
Yeah.
And the power of influence I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 as well.
Okay.
Because this guy was able to convince these women to get branded with his initials on them. I feel like that's pretty influential. The danger level is basically a 3 out of 5 as well. Because these women, they were forced or convinced to use their bodies.
Yeah. Sounds painful.
They called him Vanguard, the founder of NXIVM, a shadowy self-help organization described by federal prosecutors as cult-like. Keith Rainier has not spoken publicly since his arrest more than 2 years ago. But now, just days from being sentenced on federal charges, he is talking.
One of the things that's most important in our country is the justice system. And although, people can hate me and do, and think I'm an odious type of a character, awful actually. Both the devil and the saint should be able to get the exact same treatment under our justice system.
Good.
Today, Rainieri spoke with, of all people, the man who helped bring him down, web journalist Frank Parlato, a former NXIVM spokesman. Parlato himself has pleaded not guilty to tax and other charges that originated from his NXIVM involvement.
You plan out 14 steps ahead, huh?
If you have seen the HBO docuseries The Vow, Parlato's name may ring a bell. Parlato broke the story that a group within NXIVM was treating women as sex slaves and branding them with Ranieri's initials. Ranieri was convicted in 2019 of sex trafficking, forced labor conspiracy, and racketeering.
Do you intend to make a statement at your sentencing that you are innocent?
Yes, I am innocent. And although this is a horrible tragedy with many, many people being hurt, I think the main thrust of this has been the oppression, but really a different issue, which is hard for me to express. There is a horrible injustice here, and whether you think I'm the devil or not, the justice process has to be examined.
But victims and their families don't want to hear from Keith Raniere. They say he tried to destroy women's lives.
Really, these young women, without being aware, were on this runaway roller coaster to hell. And they were completely unaware. And that's where Keith Raniere was taking them, like, to hell.
So, sounds good, man. Okay, well, I think we should do a part 2 on this. How do you feel? You want to cover one more, or how you feeling?
Oh, sure. I think the last thing I want to say about these cults,
yes,
is I think the most important thing to remember is to live free and don't join.
Yeah, exactly.
I got that from the last Jedi, Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I
100% agree with you. And the last thing I want to say about these cults too is that, yeah, there's definitely some wacky ones, but I really liked reading the history of their religions first, because when we put that in perspective, we realize that basically these religions, they just did all that wacky shit, but they became successful at it.
Yeah,
they were able to pull it off. You know what I mean?
The cults we're talking about here are like the unsuccessful religions. Yeah,
exactly. They tried some stuff, and there's some that are a little more wacky, than others, and they weren't as inclusive. But remember, there's also cults they're not exactly a cult. I mean, there's like they have a little bit different set of beliefs. Some of it's different forms of Christianity, and they're kind of looked down upon. But really, they're just smaller groups believing kind of similar things, So I don't know. Something I always thought is like, let's say if supposedly Jesus had been recreated, came into somebody, some guy in New York, you know what I mean? He's a homeless dude and he's running around, and it was actual Jesus, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Jesus Christ. Everyone should believe in me." The guy would be laughed at. You know what I mean? No one would ever listen to this dude. So the reality is, all these religions that already exist is pretty much set in stone. It's really hard to create a new religion. So any of you out there thinking, "Hey, I want to just go out there and start a cult," man, good luck to you, because it's freaking hard. You know what I mean? So that's all I got to say about that, man. But hey, this is the filthy truth, man. The whole thing is, we're going to get dirty with it. We're going to get filthy with it. I mean, we want to expose all the crap that's going on, and eventually get into how the way we think ourselves, and like, hey, what bullshit do we think about? What, so we want to rip away all that filth so we can get to the truth. You know what I mean? That's all I got to say, man. So like and subscribe. We're going to be on all those, different places or whatever. So any last words?
I can't wait for part 2.
I can't wait either, man. It's going to be fun. All right. Goodbye for now.